That's fine.
No, you
Still.
A joint public hearing with the Planning Board and City Council was held in Council Chamber on Monday, September 21st, 2016, at 6:00 p.m. for the purpose of discussing a petition for amendments to the zoning map for the parcel of real property located at 293 Bridge Street, assessor map in lot number 26-0634, currently zoned North River Canal Corridor, NRCC, to be rezoned to business, wholesale, and automotive, B4 by ordinance. Also, a 52,491 square foot portion of real property located at 297 Bridge Street, assessor map in lot number 26-0635, currently zoned residential two-family, R2, to be rezoned to business, wholesale, and automotive, B4. Notice of this meeting was posted on August 29, 2016 at 1:22 p.m. and advertised in the Salem News on September 9, 2016 and September 12, 2016. From the City Council, absent at the moment is Councilor McCarthy. All other members present. President Turiel presiding. I now like to introduce the members of the Planning Board. I will hand that over to Planning Board Chair Ben Anderson to introduce his colleagues.
Hi, Ben Anderson. I'm sure you guys introduce yourselves. Matt Vito, Vice Chair.
Ellen Sides.
Dan Neal.
Harold Hamilton.
Kurt Reeder. Bill Brissett.
Thank you. So, to begin this, we have the presentation on the property. Mayor Driscoll.
I want to thank the members of the council and the members of the planning board for coming together this evening to discuss a proposed rezoning proposal. I know this site is familiar to all of us in this room, and wanted to walk through briefly what the proposal is before you, and then certainly introduce the team from Webb's who was here as well, who obviously is interested in the rezoning of this issue. So after several weeks and months of discussions in this chamber and elsewhere, the proposal before you is to rezone both the Universal Steel lot, affectionately known as Universal Steel Lot, and the building lot located where the current Webb's operation is, to the district of B4. At present, the Universal Steel Lot is zoned R2, and the building lot where the Webb's is zoned NRCC. The reason for the request, as many of you know, is we've been working collaboratively with Webb's on a redesign of their current operation. Initially, they had hoped to build a new building on the Universal Steel lot as part of our RFP process and the sale of that lot. There was opposition and concern from the abutters about digging in that particular location and the size and scale. They went back to the drawing board and came back to us. We met, not too long ago, just before the summer break, to review their amended alternative plan, which would entail putting an addition on the Webb's building on the opposite side of the Universal Steel lot that would enable them to put together a combination, a combined operation of what they're currently doing, but also add the retail showroom and some additional office space. I'm happy for them to share more insights into what's being proposed, but the issue before us today is to rezone both the Universal Steel lot and the building lot to B4. Some of the rationale behind the B4 is that it would enable Webb's to operate in the current way that they do now, as well as what they're proposing to do with the retail sales, the showroom piece, and the office piece. Under our zoning, there's not a lot of zoning districts that would enable an operation that has those very different parts, both the wholesale, the retail, and the office, to operate within the same operation. B4 is one of those districts. So we're frankly very excited about this alternative plan. It's smaller in scale, further away from abutters. I think it addresses many of the concerns that were raised at prior public hearings, while allowing Webb to grow and continue doing a strong business here in Salem. I'll also point out that as part of this proposal, we'd be putting on a no-build restriction on the Universal Steel lot. So this would preclude vertical construction on that area that's known as, looks like a parking lot now, for at least a 30 to 50 year time frame. In our mind, that's a significant trade-off in return for the building addition on the other side. We have had some concerns, and folks have raised concerns, I should say, about this B4 district and what happens after Webb's is here. We've had discussions with the petitioner, with Webb's, about the opportunity to think through that and be more thoughtful in how we limit, perhaps, or protect the concerns that folks have raised around having B4 there in perpetuity. We really do feel like this proposed alternative meets many of the concerns that were raised at prior public hearings, and most importantly, I think addresses our ability to be a place that's attractive to business while also balancing the needs of a neighborhood in a way that's thoughtful. Just because if we were to move forward with this B4, it does not mean the permitting stops then. Webb's would have to go before the planning board for a site plan review, so all of you will be seeing this project going forward, we hope, if the zoning goes forward, to address all of the issues that come up in site plan review, from access and circulation to exterior finishes and the like. They're looking forward to actually getting into the meat and potatoes of the proposed project. At this point, we are hopeful that the council and the planning board would affirmatively recommend the rezoning of both the Universal Steel lot and the building lot. And I'll leave it at there and ask their Webb's counsel, Joe Parenti, if he wants to add anything, and if there are pieces that we missed out, or answer any questions you may have as well.
Thank you, Mayor, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board and City Council. Joseph Parenti, 63 Federal Street, representing FW Webb. So, as picking up on the mayor's comments, there will come a time when this Universal Steel parcel is put out for disposition, and Webb, of course, will be there ready to make its bid and hopefully obtain it. And that will then, as we go through process and as you go through rezoning and permitting, it also will end up that a deed from the city ultimately will be coming forth to Webb for consideration. What the mayor suggested, that in that deed there will be restrictions around construction and non-build type restrictions. Non-vertical construction, I think, is the term used, and that's agreed to, and we understand why that is. We have the cap underneath the site, and Webb has agreed to that type of restriction, the non-build restriction on that. Now, there'll be some language about us being able to put in footings for a ramp, for a fence, things like that, but no buildings, and that really is the key. The plan we want to go forward with is the plan that you've seen, and that is the revised plan that we came back in with, which shows the addition to the existing building on our parking lot as it currently exists. Now, we need to have the Universal Steel lot to comprise this project site. And it's been suggested or raised or asked, whether we need rezoning at all. Couldn't this just be done with permits from the Zoning Board of Appeal? Couldn't it be done by variances and special permits? And this project could be built. And clearly, in our opinion, the answer is no. That is not possible. And the reason is the Universal Steel site is zoned R2 residential. And there's no permit or variance one could obtain that would allow industrial wholesale building supply retail use in a residential zone. And there's also case law which talks about not being able to use and drive over residentially zoned parcels to access commercial parcels, more restricted parcels versus less restricted. So rezoning is necessary in order for this project to go forward. Now, when one thinks about what the concerns are, and we've been listening to the administration, we've been listening to the neighborhood and the council, and what we've heard is that the concern is not so much with Webb's current operation or even Webb's proposed operation, but what happens if Webb leaves? And we, the neighborhood, we, the city, are then sort of left with this zoning that we put in place, this B4 zoning, for example. That might not fit our intended goals as a city, as a neighborhood. There are other uses in the B4 zone that some find obnoxious, that we wouldn't want to see on that site. And so we've heard that, and in discussions amongst Web team and with the administration, the solution that we think fits is that Web is prepared to add to the restrictions of the deed that are coming to Salem, coming to Webb from the city. We have building restrictions that are going on the deed that you're going to give us. We're prepared to put use restrictions on the deed as well. So these deed restrictions will now limit the use of the site to what we'll call the Webb use. All right, and that'll be certainly defined in the document, but the intent of this is that the Webb use will continue, and someone said, well, what if Webb gets bought out, or what if there's a merger, or what if they buy another company? We don't want to name it, we don't want to be so restrictive as to say it's only that company or that corporate entity, but that use. As long as that use, the Webb use continues, it will be allowed to continue. But when that use ceases, there will be no other B4 uses that would be allowed. And we believe we can do this with a deed restriction. And that can be done in the deed that the city's going to proffer to Webb for the universal lot. And it can be done by deed references, and you know, working with the city solicitor's office, you'll be able to see the language itself. But the concept is as explained. And so this is yet another attempt to address the concerns raised about what happens if Webb leaves and the B4 uses are then in place, and we're left with something that we may find offensive. And we think that by handling it this way, that concern can be addressed and enforceable. This is in a deed restriction that the city will draft, that will be in the deed from the city to Webb, recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and enforceable. So we are prepared to go forward under that, guys. We would ask, and we do want to emphasize that we need the rezoning to B4. And I know that's really the topic before both bodies this evening. We need both parcels rezoned to B4 so that we can have a project site, but offer the deed restrictions so as to give protection to the neighborhood in the event that the Webb use ceases.
Councilor Epley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one quick question for you, Attorney Corinti. If this joint body, and subsequently if the City Council chooses not to rezone, what is the intent of Webb in terms of going forward with their project?
If we can't go forward with the project if there's no rezoning, because we cannot use the Universal Steel site, and the project as we know it cannot be built. So we can't go forward without rezoning.
Any of the councilors or members of the planning board wish to ask questions of Attorney Corinti or of the mayor? Councilor Dibble.
Mr. President, Mr. Corinti, you just mentioned the use restriction, and I applaud Webb for stepping up with that offering. I think it's a good thing. Will that be on both properties, the Universal and the Webb, when the two are merged together, or will they be merged together?
The intent will be that the restrictions will cover what will then be the project site, which will encompass both. Now, your question about zoning merger, whether they actually merge or not, we're not quite sure whether that'll happen. But it almost is a red herring type of question because the restriction can cover both lots.
So it will cover both?
Yes, yes. We're going to look at that as one site. That'll be one development site, and the restrictions would, now, when I say the restrictions, the no build, no vertical construction restriction will be limited, will be well-defined as to the universal lot, so that we can build
I appreciate that.
on the other side. But
Will the use restriction prohibit things like lawyers' offices, other things going on the third, fourth, and fifth floor of the existing building?
yes,
It will prohibit it.
yes.
Can I just chime in here? So the current, I mean, under the current B4, that would be precluded. So I think going forward, the goal, at least from my perspective, is to make sure that if for some reason Webb's was not operating or this type of use wasn't operating, that we have protections in place to make sure that we're not seeing the sort of, I think, fears that folks have that would want to come in that building. I mean, from a market perspective, I find it hard to believe we'd have some sort of processing plant or, industrial use that would cause fear or concern. But we would want to have some protections built in. So it's added belts and suspenders. And I just want to stress how I'm really hopeful. Like, I think these are all additional protections. The standard, no build restriction would be 30 years. We've got 50 years with Webb's. This additional protections around trying to adjust and frankly, respond to some of the concerns from residents and others who are here about, well, long-term, what about afterward? That's what this is meant, to address. This is, how we get to yes in our minds and how we support an existing business while trying to balance the concerns that have been raised by residents. And I think Webb's is really working hard to try and do that. And I'm hopeful that we can move the zoning forward so that, as we sell this land, we can put in place those sorts of additional language.
Is there a way that we can word the use restriction that would allow, should Webb choose to rent the top floors to lawyers?
Yes, there is a way that could be done. In our initial proposal, we decided not to start carving out exclusions. We just say a blanket, but yes, as with in discussions with the city and solicitor's office, and if the restriction wants to carve out a couple of other uses that everybody finds agreeable, such as what you just mentioned, I don't know that would ever be likely while the Webb operation is ongoing, but, that's something we can look at. We didn't want to start looking for exceptions before we even put out the rule.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I would encourage you to do so, because I think the parking lot is more than what you need, and the square footage of the entire plant with the addition is more, I think it's more than what you have requested earlier with the second building. So I'd encourage that to take place so that perhaps the downtown could grow through Webb's building. Thank you.
Any other councilors or planning board members have questions? Councilor Lovely.
Follow up to that, those exemptions you talk about would require a zoning change, correct? Amendment?
No. The deed restrictions don't require a zoning change.
No, I'm talking about what.
But the B4, I'm not following, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess if you want to put offices of any sort in the B4, it would have to be an allowable use by special permit, so we'd have to amend the zoning ordinance.
I think there are some B4 uses that include the type of professional offices that are, but we would only want to keep it to what's permitted uses. But if it requires a special permit, so be it. That's why we didn't want to get into exceptions, but.
So I guess my question is, currently then, that would be an allowable use in a B4?
I believe it is. Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me.
Are you talking about Webb's? I'm sorry. I just
No,
wanna
no,
make sure.
no.
Right.
No,
Okay.
what he talked about, law.
Business or professional office, including medical, is a permitted use in the B4 today.
I'm sorry, Councilor.
No, it's okay. I yield.
Thank you. But with a 30 to 50-year use restriction, you'll be prohibited for 50 years.
That's right.
So I think we need to word it that might allow you to put some lawyer's office or equal professional offices in the building.
Okay. Well, that can, if that is a unanimous feeling, then, I suppose that's something that could be discussed, but I don't want to get into start carving out, individual uses.
I think there's some confusion. So just to be clear, offices are allowed in B4, so you wouldn't need an exception for it. And so business and professional offices are allowed if you rezone this to B4, if that fit. the intention is to try and make sure that fears of what might be also allowed in B4 don't happen in the building if Webb's use wasn't there. Not to make this more confusing. The idea is to rezone it to B4. There'll be restrictions in place for at least 50 years on the Universal Steel lot in terms of no vertical construction beyond the items that were mentioned, fence post, a foundation for a ramp and things like that. And if this use were to go away, there is some fear that somehow this is going to change the characteristics, and there might be things in B4 that folks would object to seeing in there. Those would be the items that there would be a deed restriction preventing from happening, notwithstanding the B4. Is that a little clearer? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Fried.
Yep.
Mayor, we're in agreement on that. It's the use restriction that we just talked about that might prohibit those allowed uses within the zoning to be not allowed within the use restriction. So I think the use restriction should be worded, crafted in a way that would allow some friendly uses within the building.
So B4 would always be allowed. Whatever was crafted out would be things in B4 that people might find objectionable, right? So
Okay.
that would not be one of the things that I think people would find objectionable.
Okay. I heard it as it would be crafted to be a web-related type of use.
My categorization was broader. It said only web use and everything else excluded. But we can certainly craft, as you're suggesting and as the mayor just laid out. We can talk about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Lovely.
Just to follow up on why the restriction is 40 to 50 years and not longer or not in perpetuity or...
Well, the law calls for 30 years on restrictions that don't have a specified term. So 30 years is the maximum one can alienate its rights under property law if you don't call out a term of specifics. Oftentimes we see 20-year increments of extensions. So the 50-year number was thought to be reasonable, thought to cover concerns, and of course, you know, it allows a limited time where at some point someone could say, look, this can change. The next sort of great zoning that comes in could be applied here. Why would you want, I mean, this is up to you, but why would you want to restrict a property in perpetuity when the parties may leave and you could rezone it to something much more friendly, for example? So 50 years seem to cover it. There's no magic to the number, frankly. I mean, it's what you see typically. 30 years is what the state statute says, and a 20-year addition can be implemented by exercise of an extension before the 30 years expires. So 50 seemed to be the right number.
Just to follow up on that?
Yep, you have the floor.
How could that restriction be removed at any time after it's placed? What would be the mechanism for removing that restriction?
All parties affected would have to agree. And then you would have to go in and draft a document that would remove it and then record that at the registry, because the way this will happen through a deed restriction enforced at the registry, that's an enforceable document. And so with the city of Salem being one party to this, the grantor, and the web entity being the grantee, and then of course other parties in interest certainly would be the neighbors. You know, any removal of such restrictions would require the consent of the parties, and a document would have to be filed and signed by the parties and recorded at the registry. Otherwise, because this will be in the chain of title for the property, this deed restriction, so.
Wouldn't the parties only be the grantor and the grantee, though?
It depends how it's crafted. It certainly will be that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, to not cut you up, but what you're saying is that you could add a provision to that, I don't know, what would be, direct abutters would have a say, or how, what do you, you know what I'm saying? You say the neighbors, but they're not really part of the transfer.
Yeah, and so having all of these kind of details, you know, we'll have to get back to you with.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, working with the city solicitor's office, but Yeah, I get the question and understand it.
Thank you.
So we'll find out.
Counselor Fury.
Yes, please. I wish to commend and congratulate Webb and the city of Salem in their process of doing this. I think we have to look at the overall vision, what happened down in the footprint at the power plant. And what's happening now, we can all see the visible footprint of a new, exciting footprint there, power plant, compared to the old New England power plant, Dominion. And we've had the planning board on that, we've had neighborhood meetings, city council meetings, all that. We can see positive, exciting results by working together. And I think by doing this with Webb, and Webb has been very cooperative, Webb has been part of our past, our present, and I hope it's for the future. And this is win-win for the city, as it is for Dominion into footprint, to where we are now. We'll be a better city with footprint. We'll be a better city with a renewed Webb. It's exciting. If we can cooperate, go the high road, send it over to planning. Planning, as you see, they're very professional, dedicated people. They take the neighborhood interest, they take the business interest, and the city interest into the best of their future. And they have a signature statement, they have a reputation second to none. Personally, if ever I lose an election, 2 or 3 years down the line, legally possible, I would love to serve on the planning board, because their signature statement is the future of Salem. And as we pass it on tonight, I hope we do, you're gonna see a better situation. And we're lucky and very fortunate. My Webb's hanging in there and being a part of it and passing it off to the planning board. And I've gone to many planning boards. I think Councilor Ryan represents us on the planning board. Many of you in this particular chamber have gone to the planning board. It's gonna be an exciting process, a good process, a win-win process. So I hope we all work together to make Webb part of the future of Salem. Thank you.
Counselor Flamingo.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Through you to Attorney Correnti. So after the 30-year, 50-year restriction, if it wasn't signed off before, then automatically the use restriction would go away without going back before something else?
Yes, after the 50 years, that's right. Unless, that's right. Yes, it would.
And then to chime into what Councilor Dibble was diving into, I mean, the good Ward 7 counselor, I'd also like, when we're looking into there, to also look into maker space and artist space for the upper floors too, to make that allowable. I know it's under B5 typically, and I don't know if that would require us to change something, but it would be something nice to have for that space. But that's another discussion for another day. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Counselor Sargent.
Yeah, thank you. Just to dovetail on Councilor Fury's comments also, and it's also past planning boards that had the foresight to create zoning, to change zoning, to leave some grandfather uses there, even though they weren't what they wanted going forward. And it was our planning boards that changed zoning and moved the power plant from Peabody Street to where it is now. If they didn't have that foresight, we might have a larger, expanded power plant down in the Point neighborhood, down along that whole South River behind where Wendy's is. We may, you know, we wouldn't have a coal pile, but the coal pile became an oil terminal. Oil terminal isn't there, we have Picker and Wharf there. The oil terminal moved up to the power plant, then moved out of town. Those things evolved. That was some good planning moving 50 years forward. And that's why this universal steel, why they zoned it R2, as much for what they didn't want there as for what they did in being with the neighborhood. And of course we want to help Webb stay here. But I also want to help every neighbor in that neighborhood stay here also. And on the deed restrictions, I used to speak of them a lot until I read something happened in New York City where it got undone. So the neighborhood had the protection of zoning, which is more protection than a deed restriction. But if the parties that entered into a deed restriction can undo it, then if 8 votes of the city council can change zoning, 8 votes of the city council can undo the deed restriction also. So the neighbors would have no less protection on that deed restriction than they have with the zoning. And so we can see what's going on with zoning now. So that is, how do we get around the fact that that can be undone legally? In New York City, they had a deed restriction that a place was senior housing. The city council undid it, and the senior housing got sold for $50 million to somebody who flipped it for $100 million to make high-end condos. So how do we get around the fact that this deed restriction can be undone just as zoning can be changed.
Through you, Mr. President. Counselor, I'm not familiar with the New York City case, but I do know that deed restrictions are probably one of the most commonly used tools to limit uses on sites. And they're used for use, they're used for construction like we're using here. It offers real protection. Now, you're stating, well, if we got a supermajority of a planning board and a supermajority of a city council could change things. Well, I suppose that's correct. That's probably true with most everything that you deal with. So a deed restriction like this, which the city's going to write, and it's going to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, is a powerful and enforceable mechanism. So, you know, it's a well-recognized tool, and it fits in this case. So,
Now, if we're going to do a deed restriction, I've seen it where you can have whatever the restrictions are, there may be a 50-year limit to that deed restriction. But if you put it on the abutters deeds where they have a benefit of that restriction, there may not be a 50-year term to their deed. So if their deed, you can have the benefit of something on somebody else's property on your deed by agreement, and it can't be undone. It's on the abutters deeds that they have the benefit of this deed restriction. So if we're going to do the deed restriction, then every abutter and their secondary abutter should have the benefit of the deed restriction.
I think I know the concept you're referring to, and I think generally you're correct on what you're saying, and that's what we want to take a little more time to flesh out. I think that is a correct concept, and we can do that here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
I had 3 questions for your proposal and for the applicant. I sort of look at this in the same vein as a special permit, or if I'm looking at a change for a project, and there are 3 questions I normally ask myself related to something like this. One would be, what's the compatibility with the city's master plan? If I can answer that. What's the public benefit? And thirdly, what's the compatibility with the surrounding uses?
Do you want me to answer those now? Okay. Okay. Well, the compatibility with the city's master plan. The master plan certainly talks a lot about business and economic development. It talks about protecting businesses and enhancing the business community and climate, while doing so, you know, with respect to the neighborhoods. And, you know, in our 8 square mile city, we have businesses on top of neighborhoods at every turn. And it leads to friction sometimes. But part of the master plan certainly is economic growth and development. And keeping a company like Webb, who's been here for decades in the city, by allowing them to add an 8,000 square foot footprint addition, 16,000 square foot addition, 8,000 square feet. That's what we're talking about here. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that is the ask, that is the addition. Now, we're talking about rezoning, and how does that fit? Well, I would respectfully suggest that fits well with the city's master plan for protecting business and economic development. Now, you're going to have to give me the other 2 elements.
Public benefit and then compatibility with surrounding uses.
Sure. Well, okay. Public benefit, we have a tax-paying business with jobs that is going to expand and stay in the city. You know, in other communities, buildings like this, companies up and go, buildings like this sit vacant. You know, and we know that vacant properties are the worst neighbors of all, right? So we've seen them in the North River Canal, and luckily we're getting tens of millions of dollars of new investment in the North River Canal to address so many of those properties. This is a more modest investment, but nevertheless maybe of more significance, because this shows to the city, this shows to the business community that the city is welcome and open for business, that we have an existing business here, that we want to keep here, that we want it to grow here, that pays more taxes, creates a few more jobs. I think that hits on all cylinders on public benefit. And what was the third prong?
Compatibility with surrounding areas.
Yeah, so surrounding uses. All right. So if one looks at the website itself, and you draw a circle of, I'm going to say 500 feet, maybe 750 feet, from the web circle, from the web property, in a circle all around it. I think you're going to hit 4 or 5 different zoning districts. You're going to hit things like a HMA, like a veterinary hospital, beautiful residential streets, your B5 downtown with churches, and you're going to hit a major judicial complex. That's the surrounding area. And so, boy, it becomes difficult to say we're going to be compatible with everything. But when one pulls back and looks at the intended use and knows that this use has been here for that long and has been a good neighbor for that long, that, is it compatible to put an 8,000 square foot footprint addition on this building and let this company continue for decades more to come? Yeah, we think it's compatible. We think it fits in that area, and I think the North River Canal Corridor would be fortunate to maintain a business like this. So.
Mr. Vino?
I don't know, it's probably a question for Councilor Correnti. The web property that is zoned NRCC today,
Yes.
do you know what that zone was prior to it having been rezoned NRCC?
I'm being told, the answer is no, I don't, but I'm being told by the city solicitor that it was industrial zone.
Any other questions from members of the council or the, yes? Sides?
My understanding is this is outside of the SRA,
Yes.
and that's always a concern of mine when there is no design review oversight. I think that's missing for this site. I think this is a really important site for the city, very visible, and I have hesitation in going forward, not with the zoning per se, but without that oversight for that particular.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take that as a question. So if, and I understand the concern coming from the planning board on that issue, and we've had many projects that are outside the SRA and NRCC that don't have DRB, that we've always sort of found a way that the planning board has had sort of great oversight under site plan review. Site plan review, as you know, is as broad as you want to make it. And, we would expect that, this will get a thorough review, and, we understand the location and the sensitivity, so we'll work with you.
Any other questions from the council or from the planning board? If not, I will open it up for public testimony. Mayor?
Comment. Thank you, Councilor. I definitely want to get to public testimony. I just want to make sure, for the record, that folks realize I've got a school committee meeting I also need to get to, and I'll be leaving shortly, so I apologize for leaving early, but Tom Daniel and Aaron Schaefer from the planning department are here, as well as Beth Renard, city solicitor, and Dominic Pangal, the chief of staff, so well represented on the city fronts, and I apologize for having to leave sooner than I thought.
Sure. So, with that, is anybody in the room wish to appear in favor of this? Not having any. We have, for appearing in opposition, first, we've already received public testimony submitted to us by email from a number of people. I'll read their names into the record for starters. We have public testimony from Darryl Libovici, Barbara Cleary, Emily Udy on behalf of HSI, Jane Arlander, and Vicky Siriani. Those have all been received today, and starting this morning, the planning board has those as part of their materials for deliberation. The city council also has them. I would ask that, although we don't have any specific restrictions on what people say, I think given the amount of time that we have been holding these hearings over the last 9 months now, I would prefer if those people didn't come up and simply read what they've already submitted to us into the record a second time. But if they want to come up and make comment or make other comment as well, that would be welcome. So that said, I will start with the left side of the room and call people up to speak. Ask you again, as usual, we're going to try and run this without a timer. Just please keep your remarks brief and concise, and also try not to make, as we've said before, try not to make points that other people prior have already made. So that said, we'll like to hear from everybody in the room. So, Chuck. And again, when you come up, name and address for the record, even though you've all been here and done this before. It's still a new hearing, so.
My name's Chuck Von Bruns, 3 River Street. These are short comments. My main comment is, why is the city in such a hurry to rush through this significant zoning change? It may not seem like you're rushing through because you're using this 9-month thing, but this part of it seems to be rushing through, and I don't understand the reason. Because as part of the Universal Steel parking lot remediation, the city obligated itself by contract to pay Mass Development $500,000 if they sell the property before October 2017. If it is sold after that date, the city does not have to pay the $500,000. My question is, why is the city willing to throw away $500,000 of Salem taxpayer money? Let's not forget that Salem is not a charity set up for the benefit of business. Why not wait until after October 2017 to put the property up for sale? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side of the room? No? Oh, there we go.
President Lou Sirianni, Botts Court, Salem. Mr. President, councilors, Mayor Driscoll, our new planning director, and the planning board. I'm here not just as a homeowner within 2 blocks of the site, but a 30-year practicing architect with a master's degree in urban design. My buildings have either conformed or requested variances, and on one rare occasion, requests for change in zoning. So I'm very conversant with zoning issues. I'm here tonight to register a friendly appeal to keep the NRCC zoning as is and convert the Universal Steel site to NRCC. My friend Joe Correnti makes a good point about residential use on the Universal Steel site. That's not going to work. He's made that very clear. NRCC, however, will certainly work. Now, the important point here is the neighbors, all of my friends and neighbors in the room have embraced and endorsed the Webb plan. So this is not about their plan. It's strictly about zoning. The current Webb property is NRCC. There was a lot of thought about that. And if that was joined with the Universal Steel site, that would be consistent with the zoning in that neighborhood. I think it's important to understand that the website is currently NRCC, not just everybody in this room, but everyone in Salem. And I'll briefly outline 4 reasons why NRCC for both sites is preferable. Number 1, the Webb plan can move ahead under the NRCC zone. A variance for setback and perhaps a special use permit may be required. This type of variance is granted every month by the city boards. We propose to partner with Webb, the neighbors, to speed that approval. We will write letters in support and we will attend meetings. NRCC is compatible with residential use. That was the whole idea in this zone. The Goodhue property, Goodhue housing property, and the Flintan, both of which Joe is familiar with, are good examples Those projects have good architects and good developers. The south side of Bridge Street should be residential, like the St. James Convent conversion and the Gateway site. If honest, no one would want a B4 directly abutting their property. Spot zoning, number 4. There are only 2 zones currently on Bridge Street. I think you all have the plans there. NRCC and residential. I think an independent arbiter will agree that a change to B4 from NRCC, or instead of NRCC, is spot zoning and not legal. In summary, the neighborhood would like to see plans proceed, the Webb plans proceed, no question about that. We're embracing it, it's a good plan, and we'd like to see it proceed. I believe that the best way for that to happen is for Webb to join with the neighborhood and proceed with their current NRCC zoning. The neighbors will help to grease the rails to get the NRC variance approved quickly, and I think that's an important point, quickly. Conversely, we will continue to appeal the unnecessary and harmful change to an incompatible B4 zone. Thank you.
Next person?
Barbara Clary, 104 Federal Street. I'm one of the people who sent a letter today, and I want to say that I'm very pleased that at least some people, including Joe Carenti, have read it, and also heard from other people about the concern about B4 in our neighborhood. What I'm trying to respond to what we've heard tonight, and I haven't had a chance to really speak to anyone else, but I'll give you a couple of thoughts that I have, which is, one is, I think if we left Webb, the current Webb property, NRCC, and did what Louis has suggested, which is rezone Universal Steel, we solve a lot of problems. We solve the design review problem right off the bat. We solve the what if later on you want it to be residential or other uses in NRCC. My understanding is that the uses currently in that building are being expanded. They're not new uses. I don't see any reason to rezone that parcel before when what they're proposing can happen in NRCC. I understand Universal Steel, but I think I don't understand the Webb parcel rezone. So I hope that we can come to a way of moving this forward. If the deed restriction is the way to go, you must see the deed restriction before you vote on the zoning. It's critical. But I actually think that this whole thing works a whole lot better under NRCC and is more consistent with the master plan. And that's what I would recommend.
Thank you. Next person? Oh, wait, we have another one on this side first. There.
Carol Cos, 7 River Street. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. A lot of progress has been made so far, and there are just a few ends to tie up to make this project go forward. Sadly, rezoning this property to B4 is not the way to go. It sets a bad precedent and is worrisome for the neighbors and the McIntyre Historic District. Webb happens to about our neighborhood, which is zoned R2, so it shouldn't surprise anyone that we want what is best for our neighborhood, and B4 is not in the picture. R2 offers us the best protection, not a deed restriction. Will it really take Webb that much longer to go through the normal permitting processes, just as every business must, by keeping the zoning as is? The NRCC permitting process protects the city and its residents so that the best results are obtained. NRCC is a vision for the long term. NRCC is the master plan. Rezoning to B4 is short-sighted and is a vision only for now, but not for the long term. And it's also spot zoning. As neighbors, we want to work with Webb to get their plans approved, but if B4 is passed, we will be forced to appeal. We don't want to go that route. We want to work as a neighborhood with Webb. So let's make it easy tonight. Vote against the B4 zoning, and let's move forward with the approvals that every other business has to go through in order to finish up the project. Webb shouldn't be given preferential treatment. Even under B4, variances are still needed. Don't be influenced by Webb's threat to move out of the city. If Webb decided to leave, it shouldn't shock anyone here, if you've worked the numbers, that it may actually be financially best for the city in the long run. But we don't want to lose Webb. It is strange that the city may consider buying a half-acre carnival lot on New Derby Street, which is valued at $1.4 million, yet is contemplating selling the Universal lot, 1.2 acres, when land and parking is a scarce commodity in Salem, and which lot abuts the McIntyre Historic District, is near the courthouse, the train station, and is a major entrance corridor to Salem. Just doesn't make any sense. Ask yourself if you would want a B4 zone in your backyard. The NRCC is appropriate adjacent to a residential neighborhood. B4 is not compatible to a residential neighborhood. This is a serious change, one with huge ramifications, and a deed restriction doesn't protect the neighbors, and it may be reversed in the future. What about changing R2 to NRCC? Has anyone considered other alternatives besides the B4? Visitors come to Salem for tourism, history, restaurants, architecture, the waterfront. Let's work to make it better, not look backward to an industrial use of this land, even with a deed restriction. This can be an exciting time for all concerned, the neighborhood, Webb, and the city. We should not be at odds with one another. I'm sorry that Webb has not communicated with and worked with the neighborhood on this final phase. If they did, they would find out why we are so involved. We are like the people Dr. Seuss refers to, who Councilor Epley quoted at a previous city council meeting. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. We care a whole lot about our neighborhood, and that is why we do not want B4 zoning. We don't want to be forced to appeal. Please work with us. Thank you.
Anybody else on this side of the room? Go ahead.
Hi, Josiah Fisk, 358 Essex Street. Business address is 10 Derby Square. I want to speak, in fact, first as someone who runs a business. When you run a business, you have deals that you have to look at, contracts and so forth. And one of the things that you have to do when you're doing that is to say, all right, here's what it says. Here's what it seems to be contemplating. What is it not contemplating? What are the unintended consequences that might happen that might be perfectly consistent with what is in the contract or what is in the plan, but haven't been thought about and haven't been considered before, let's say, you sign the contract. So when I look at this situation with that viewpoint, I see quite a lot of things, and I would be very, very surprised, and this is an interesting proposal this evening, and I think I want to join the people in the neighborhood who have some words of praise for the Webb folks and what they have done with this, how hard they've worked on this. I know that wasn't easy for you guys. So I think all of this is potentially positive, but this is a complicated plan. And the one thing that I keep hearing this word, the intention is this, the intention is that, and that's fine. The intentions, all of the intentions are good that we've heard tonight. But what it comes down to is, the one thing that is definitely happening if this vote goes forward is this thing is definitely being rezoned. Everything else, well, we hope it's this, we hope it's that, it's our intent. Why do we have to rezone this before any of the other pieces are in place that are supposed to go along with this? I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. There are any number of opportunities. I mean, we hope that Webb does buy this. We hope that the deed restriction happens and that it has the terms in it and that, you know, things don't happen to change it along the way. But we have no guarantee of that. We have nothing on that. All we've got is a piece of property that's B4, and who knows what's going to really happen with it. That's where we are at if this zoning goes forward at this point. And that's what I want to say. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next person.
Good evening. Justin Whittier, 10 River Street.
I'm here in my capacity as president of the Federal Street Neighborhood Association to read this letter from our board. The board of the Federal Street Neighborhood Association strongly opposes and rejects the necessity of a zoning change to either or both the Universal Steel and FW Webb parcels to B4. Our membership voted unanimously in January of this year to oppose B4 zoning as part of Webb's response to the city's RFP, and the same concerns apply today. This opposition is based both on the particular case and on the precedent it would set for our neighborhood. This change would allow for uses incompatible with our historic neighborhood, allow building heights of 45 feet and lot coverage of 80%. Bad enough for either parcel, these dimensional risks would be greatly enlarged by the combination of the two parcels. In addition, B4 strips away the protection afforded by design review, which the present NRCC zoning provides. Abutters have important concerns about specific details which Webb has yet to present, including the uses and extent of the now 8,000 square foot outdoor storage, frequency of delivery truck traffic, lighting, and hours of operation. NRCC zoning is essential to provide the design review protection that will address our concerns. While we appreciate Webb's suggestion that they might enter into a voluntary design review process, this plainly offers no guarantee, as it would be non-binding. And in the future, should Webb propose further construction in this high-impact entry point into our city, or should it sell the property altogether, the neighborhood, planning board, and council could rely on no design review control over it, since the parcel would be subject to all that B4 zoning allows by right. A change to B4 also violates the North River Canal Corridor Master Plan, and the precedent threatens to be the first domino to fall in a line of properties along Bridge Street directly abutting our homes. Residents have invested in the vision contained in the plan and have trusted in the protection it offers and the steady progress it promises. Businesses, too, have been permitted under NRCC zoning. They have received no special exemption. Why should FW Webb? This is an ad hoc zoning change to accommodate a single project. We believe it to be spot zoning and to be entirely unnecessary. FW Webb is an existing, non-conforming NRCC use. Why not allow it a limited expansion? We support the judicious awarding of special permits and variances to accommodate the envisioned project. We ask the councilors and the member of the planning board to carefully examine if this can be accomplished without a permanent B4 zoning change, a change which carries with it all of these risks, and a change which is furthermore strongly opposed by tax-paying residents of the neighborhood. Why wouldn't you do it that way? Surely, with a consensus among the neighborhood city council, the mayor, FW Webb, the required permits and variances could be granted in a streamlined and efficient way. Recognize that it is not the case that rezoning to B4 will simply allow the Webb project to go forward. Zoning relief will still be required. For example, both parcels lie squarely in the flood hazard overlay district. Since they are situated in FEMA's flood zone A, special permits will be required to allow building. Moreover, Webb's revised plan, vague though it is, shows the rear setback to be far smaller than B4's required 25 feet. A variance will be required to allow this. This and more will need to be addressed. The difference in relief needed for either zoning is not fundamental, simply a matter of degree. Webb's convenience should not trump the concerns and values of our neighborhood. We are cognizant of the fact that after a long and at times contentious process, there is a strong desire to see this matter settled, and also that there is a view that an important signal will be sent about Salem's business-friendly climate if we satisfy the demands of FW Webb. Demands reinforced by dubious threats from Webb COO Bob Mucciarone to pull up stakes and leave Salem, despite contrary public testimony by Webb President Jeff Pope. Each of you must exercise due diligence and consider the particular merits of this proposed change apart from any fatigue or dubious notion of broader signal sent. If anything, the signal sent will to be Salem residents. The city is responsive to their voices and protective of their values. After all, we are not seeking to scuttle a longtime business's desire to expand. We are seeking to accommodate it in a mutually agreeable fashion. Salem welcomes commerce and industry, but we expect that both should conform to the needs of the city and its people, not that the city and its people should conform to the needs of a specific commercial entity, especially when practical options are available to satisfy everyone. Salem has made its character secondary to commercial interests in the past, during the period of urban renewal, to disastrous effect. Finally, there should be no question of a zoning change to the Universal Steel parcel if it is not sold and the council has powerful incentive not to sell that parcel, since any sale before October 2017 will incur repayment of monies to mass development, which will diminish or erase the proceeds of this sale, a dollar value which is still unknown. In addition, the mayor has suggested the city might acquire the present Alpha Auto lot for use as parking or open space. Given that this lot is likely contaminated as well, the city would merely be trading one liability for another. We recommend that the city instead consider the lease swap suggested by Councilor Sargent, whereby the present owners lease their respective parcels for use by the other party. The city could thereby maintain control of Universal Steel, a capped contaminated waste site, and provide an easement to Webb for its operations, obviating any need for a zoning change. Should the city decide to go forward with a sale by auction of the Universal Steel parcel and rely on a deed restriction to prevent building, we urge that all measures be taken to ensure restrictions are secured prior to any sale, and that those restrictions are likewise made available to the public and the council to review prior to any sale. Recognize that a deed restriction is no guarantee that Universal can ever be built upon. It can be undone in the future by the signers if they so choose. In either event, our objections to the zoning stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Meg Toohey, 122 Federal Street. I want to thank Webb for coming forward with a creative solution, but I think that you've heard from our neighborhood that keeping NRCC is critically important to us. If the Universal Steel site needs to be rezoned, why not rezone it to NRCC? And why not have Webb go through the same process that, as Joe said, all of the other developers who have invested millions of dollars in this corridor have gone through? Why would you, as a council and a planning board, allow one developer to have a special consideration that no one else has, and that other developers have put a long time and a lot of money and effort into? It's just not fair to us as citizens or to the city. We have a master plan. We need to work under that master plan. The NRCC does that. I also urge you to consider Arthur's lease proposal. And finally, I don't believe, as many others have mentioned, that you have the information tonight to be able to take a vote. Thank you so much.
Next person.
Good evening, members of the council, the planning board, public, and Webb. Nice to have you here. My name is Jane Arlander, and I live at 93 Federal Street in Salem. As a native and a longtime resident of Salem, I'm here tonight to oppose the rezoning of the current Webb property at 293, 295 Bridge Street and the former Universal Steel site to B4 zoning. That being said, I'm not opposed to Webb's expansion. I do believe, like many others, that Webb's expansion project can proceed without the need to permanently change the land use. For me, it's difficult to be sympathetic to Webb's concern about having to request so many variances and special permits to achieve its expansion goals. Other developers in Salem do it all the time. Why should one developer be given preferential treatment so as to avoid the permitting and design review process? Furthermore, I know of no other developer in the last several decades that has been promised a similar zoning change unless the rezoning extended an existing and abutting district. I'll now address 6 specific concerns that relate to the rezoning of the current Webb and Universal Steel projects. The first is a legal concern. Changing the zoning of 2 adjacent parcels on Bridge Street, each with a different zoning classification, to accommodate the expansion of a single privately owned project is a classic case of changing the zoning to meet the needs of one project. Projects should be attenuated to meet the existing zoning laws and not vice versa. I understand that our city solicitor has provided a legal opinion that states that rezoning the universal steel lot is not spot zoning. I say, if it walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. B4 wholesale automotive zoning along the North River Canal corridor and historic Federal Street neighborhood is ill-conceived and out of place. B4 zoning on Bridge Street is akin to a fish out of water. If you refer to the city's Salem's NRC zoning map, which I provided everybody a copy with, you will note, and I've put little X's where the Webb and the Universal Steel property is, that you see a sea of red, which is two-family residential. You see some blue, which is one family over here across the river. And then you see the violet or purple, which is North River Canal. As you know, currently, the North River Canal Corridor District is classified as a mixed-use district where primary use is commercial and secondary use is residential. The reality is now that the NRCC district is rapidly becoming a dense residential area. It's no longer industrial or primarily commercial. Consider the large multifamily complexes that have been built or are going to be built at the Salem Suede site, the Salem Oil and Grease, the Gateway Center, Flintan, 28, and the 28 Goodhue Street properties. I think another thing you'll see on this map is that the map demonstrates that rezoning of these properties on Bridge Street to B4 will not extend any existing abutting zoning district. And of course, the B4 is a teal color on the zoning maps of Salem. There is no teal on this map of the North River Canal and its surrounds. The proponent requesting B4 zoning change has not supplied the public and the city, as far as I know, with some important specifics about its expansion project. There are a lot of things we don't know and should know before taking such a drastic step as rezoning. We don't know whether the current Webb property is contaminated. This is a concern to abutters like myself, since a new building is proposed for this property. Recall that a number of Federal Street properties were contaminated by the Universal Steel operation. Well, Webb is right next door. We have not been given any specifics as to the actual size, design, construction materials of the new building. We don't know how large the loading ramps are, the loading docks, and we don't know how much the environmental cap must be disturbed to build these docks. What's the width of the buffer zone between the project and nearby homes? How will the new foundation be built? I can speak for my house and many other nearby houses that have fieldstone foundations. They are extremely vulnerable to even modest vibrations, and even the RAM method of creating a foundation creates a moderate vibration. That's a serious concern. How will the business expansion affect traffic on Bridge Street? What's the bottom line financial gain to the city? Will B4 zoning reap the most for the two Bridge Street parcels? I'm sure you also have quite a few more questions than just mine. It just seems premature and irresponsible to me to rezone properties in the R2 and NRC zoning districts to B4 until more specific details of the project are known. Now, some council members have voiced concerns that if the city doesn't grant B4 zoning to an existing Salem business, it will be construed as an anti-business message. And that's true. However, think about the message that such rezoning will send to existing Salem developers. Developers of the Salem Suede, the Gateway Project, Salem Oil and Grease, Flintan, the old Salem jail sites, they've all had to undergo a long and arduous review by numerous local boards to build their projects. Why should F.W. Webb's expansion project be exempt from the same customary governmental and public reviews that other developers undergo? In essence, B4 zoning gives F.W. Webb a free pass to do an awful lot. We all welcome the right kind and location of commercial development in Salem. That being said, we should be consistent with our treatment and expectations of all developers and business owners. One doesn't have to be a city planner to realize that a project that lies in an entrance corridor, subject to flooding, and abutting an historic neighborhood and downtown, should undergo rigorous design review. Allowing for B4 zoning with a voluntary design review is not a responsible planning practice, unless, of course, the goal is to cater to a project proponent and falsely mollify public concerns. Any project with 8,000 square feet of outside storage space, large truck loading docks, a very small lot, the lot is only 1.02 acres, and a closely abutting historic residential neighborhood should be subject to a thorough design review so as not to adversely affect surrounding properties. A voluntary design review offers us no guarantees. And as my mother told me when we used to go to my grandmother's house for Christmas, we're almost there. B4 zoning is typical of industrial park locations. The current Webb and formal Universal Steel properties lie central to most of the city's residential, judicial, transportation, tourism, entertainment, governmental, and institutional facilities. The uses allowed in B4 zoning do not represent the best uses of the properties on Bridge Street. Why is this true? In most cases, B4 zoning uses will not enhance or complement Salem's courthouse, transportation, tourism, recreation, and historic residential districts. In conclusion, I would like to share with you one of the greatest fears that residents along the North River have. They fear that once B4 zoning gets ensconced on Bridge Street, it will continue to creep in either direction. Last spring, the Council and Planning Board were asked to approve the rezoning of the Universal Steel lot to B4. Now, the Council and Planning Board are being asked to rezone not only the Universal Steel lot, but also the F.W. Webb property to B4. Our worst fear is already on the horizon. I urge you all to vote no for B4 zoning on Bridge Street. And thank you very much for your perseverance.
Darrell Lebovisi, 122 Federal Street. Mr. President, I acknowledge your request that I not read the letter, and I won't do it. I agree with and support the comments of all the previous speakers. I share their concerns, and I won't repeat their comments. As a procedural matter, Mr. President, may I instead address a couple of comments through you to Webb's counsel?
Sure, if you want to address any other issues,
Okay.
yes, with this.
Thank you. Clearly, one of the things that concerns us is the suggestion that the B4 will go through with no prior review of the text of the deed restrictions. So, Mr. Carenti, through you, Mr. President, will Webb agree that there will be adequate time and review process of the deed restriction before any request is made of the city for the B4 zoning.
Mr. Renti, I guess I'll break press a little bit and let you allow you a response briefly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The city solicitor will be drafting the deed restrictions. We'll be reviewing them, and I assume you all will be reviewing also. So, we're working under the assumption that you would see these prior to a final vote. So that's what we're assuming. We certainly want to see them because we have the same interests as the neighborhood as well. So,
Would the same
come back up to the podium if you would. If you can come back up to the podium so that
Thank
they
you,
get you on
sir.
the microphone.
Thank you. Would the same opportunity for review be accorded the public?
I can address that. That'll be circulated. That's circulated to us. That is a public record. Any such restrictions, and I don't think there'd be any problem making that available. It's not a. It'll be. I'm certain that once we see it, it will be circulated as well, and any comments or issues that neighbors have would probably be addressed through the ward councilor, the councilors at large, or however you wish to register them, or just register them directly with us.
Would that be, for example, through an extension of the public hearing?
It would not be through an extension of the public hearing because we're on the zoning matter itself.
Yes.
This is not that's not tied to the deed. The deed would be tied to the sale of the property. So they're separate matters in that respect.
Yes.
But, before that deed is executed, it will be something that we have a chance to review with the city. I can't tell you what the exact process will be for the deed being handled. The city solicitor may be able to fill that in a little bit as to how she envisions that process working. But I know, I can just safely say that that the final deed will not be something that just sort of pops out fully formed out of nowhere.
Well, in that case, let me just end this particular point.
I think we all share that too.
By saying clearly what everybody should have heard is that the concerns about B4 are deeply tied to the details of the deed restriction. And any process which authorizes B4 before there is a clear opportunity to review and discuss that the specifics of that, my apologies, are clearly suspect. There's been a lot of talk about deed restrictions and how much protection they give. I'd like to point out that the Osram Sylvania site had a deed restriction that prohibited any residential use on that property because of the contamination there. That restriction was voided within the past couple of years. And there's a very large residential development that is being permitted on that site. Again, I share with the other speakers the concerns. B4, we believe, is not necessary for the web plan to go through. There will be needs for the same relief, maybe not the identical ones, but we believe firmly that there will be needs for variances and special permits. And we do not believe that voting B4 will expedite and facilitate the web development. We believe it will slow it, and that is not what we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Fred Biebesheimer. I live at 17.5 River Street. I'm here to speak in opposition to the rezoning of the Universal Lot and the existing FW Webb lot to B4 for all the reasons that have been outlined by other speakers, including the letters from Historic Salem and the Federal Street Neighborhood Association. As a planning board, your input process carries great weight with the City Council. I'm concerned by what at least it initially seemed to be a scripted approval of the new web proposal without sufficient time to really incorporate the testimony of the public that you're hearing tonight into your decision-making process. Your meeting immediately following, I'm skeptical that you have enough time to incorporate what you've heard this evening and make a recommendation this evening, as I understand was originally planned so that it could be voted on at City Council later on this week. I'm skeptical that that's possible, given what we've heard tonight. A little ad hoc that wasn't in my notes, and even new information even has been presented this evening that none of us have had any opportunity to review, and that's specifically some new proposals for deed restrictions that have been pointed out are really directly tied to the concerns that the neighbors have about the B4 rezoning. At this point in time, we have minimal schematic designs, no details on the financial aspects of the deal, no details on the level of mandatory design review, and no information really on the no-build deed restrictions that protect our neighborhood from the breaking of the cap on the hazardous waste site on Universal Steel property. I urge the members of the Planning Board to use their influence with the City Council to challenge the preconceived notion that B4 zoning is the only way to proceed with this new proposal. During your meeting following this public hearing, please consider that there are alternatives to B4 zoning that would allow FW Webb to expand their business as desired, but at the same time, protect the residents of the abutting historic neighborhood, and equally important, protect the character of Salem as a tourist destination in this major entry corridor. You are in a unique position to provide real planning guidance to the City and Council. Options that are available include providing FW Webb with necessary variances to expand their businesses within NRCC zoning, and the lease swap agreements that have already been discussed, where the city maintains ownership of the Universal Steel lot and grants easements and other accommodations to meet the functional requirements of FW Webb. Creative guidance from the Planning Board could make this proposal a win for everyone involved. I urge you to carefully consider your role in the process and recommend a path that can be accepted by all, rather than proceeding down a path of spot zoning that will only mire this proposal in years of expensive appeals to the benefit of nobody, an outcome that none of us want to see transpire. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speak from this side of the room?
Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. My name is Constance Arlander, 91 Federal Street, Salem, Mass. Ever since I moved to Salem 38 years ago, each mayor, that's now 5 mayors, have expressed an interest in improving the appearance of the entrance corridors leading to our cities in Salem. Changing the zoning from NRCC to B4 in this section of Bridge Street will not enhance the view as thousands of visitors enter Salem. An 8,000 square foot outside storage yard housing oil tanks, dumpsters, propane tanks, piles of pipes will adversely affect the streetscape's aesthetics of one of Salem's busiest entrance corridors. And I passed out the picture of a Waterford, Connecticut web storage area. It's a warehouse, distribution center, and showroom on a 20-acre site. Just imagine this outside storage of these items on the former Universal Steel site, which is only 1.02 acres. So it wouldn't be as large as it showed, but this was our way of showing what it is that's going to be there. In conclusion, I would like to go on record as being opposed to rezoning the Webb parcel and the Universal parcel to B4, based on the reasons that have mentioned tonight by previous speakers. This will negatively change the visual landscape of Bridge Street entrance corridor, as well as for the abutting historic McIntyre District neighbors and visitors. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Ann Whittier, 10 River Street. My neighbor asked me to read her letter. Could I do that? My neighbor Lisa Spence. I can't be present at this meeting, but I want to register my opposition to rezoning the Universal Steel and FW Webb lots B4. I agree with the arguments put forth by my neighbors Historic Salem and the Federal Street Neighborhood Association, and hope that the City Council and Planning Board reject this unnecessary zoning change. I recall that when the council voted on surplus, one councilor reassured his colleagues that a vote to declare the Universal Steel lot surplus would not mean that the land had to be sold. Given the mayor's intention to sell Universal Steel as a tax title sale, bypassing council approval, it turns out that the surplus vote actually did all but guarantee sale of the Universal lot. I bring this up only because I think the change to B4 is analogous. We are hearing reassurances like, oh, it will be B4, but we'll never build a 45-foot structure on 80% of the lot, and we'll have some design review. I, for one, am not reassured. My greatest concern continues to be any construction that disturbs the cap and the PCB-contaminated soil at the site. I'm not convinced that a standard deed restriction is going to be protective enough, especially if the Universal lot gets rezoned to B4 and its value as a building site increases. Please reject the B4 zoning for these parcels. There are so many other options that allow FW Webb to expand their business while protecting our neighborhood. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other members?
John Carr. I reside at 7 River Street. I'm a lawyer in Salem with an office at 9 North Street. And I would like to begin by also complimenting Webb, wherever they are, and Mr. Parenti. But we're not there yet. We're almost there, but we're not there yet. It seems to me that usually zoning is proactive, not retroactive. That it is not supposed to be designed to suit the particular needs of a single individual or entity. And usually the law requires that the proposed zoning to be part of a cohesive, coherent, and logical plan. Usually one would expect that any proposed rezoning would be met with an open mind on both the part of the members of the Salem City Council and the members of the Salem Planning Board. That the proposed rezoning would be clear in terms of all of the changes proposed. That it would be fully explained at tonight's public hearing. That there would be an interval of quiet reflection to consider the public input at this joint public hearing, both pro and con, although we have heard no pro. So how has that rational process for rezoning be perverted, and one might even say politically hijacked? Perhaps the worst is that on July 21, 2016, each member of the Salem City Council was asked by the mayor to commit how they would each vote when the subject of the proposed rezoning came up. Now, I would submit that you don't have to go to law school to conclude that that might, just might, seem to make a sham and a mockery out of tonight's whole public hearing process all by itself. I've been politically active in this city in preservation and neighborhood issues for literally 45 years, and I've never seen anything even remotely like that ever before. I can't believe that that is what the mayor meant when she proclaimed that, quote, transparency, quote, was going to be her chief goal this year during her annual State of the City address last January. Instead of a period of quiet reflection, the planning board has scheduled a special meeting to make a recommendation to the full city council immediately following tonight's joint public hearing. But why should I be surprised? Because that's the same planning board that voted unanimously last January 6, 2016, to approve a far worse proposal. And I say this with the greatest respect, notwithstanding Councilor Furey's remarks. For that, all of you should be deeply ashamed. It was the neighborhood who built a solid, irrefutable case involving 20 hours of detailed public testimony in 5 separate hearings between January 6, 2016 and April 5th, 2016, not the planning board. And I suggest there's a lesson to be learned here because of that expedited process. And the primary lesson is go slow and get it right. So let's take a second and look at how we got to the NRCC zoning for 293 Bridge Street. There was a 13-member blue ribbon panel that was convened with whenever it was. I was one of them. We met bi-monthly for 3.5 years. We had a $100,000 grant. I believe, well, I'm not sure who it was from, but we were working with that money. We used that money to retain a city planner who was employed then by Goody Clancy Associates of Boston, then and now regarded as perhaps Boston's largest and most highly regarded architectural office. And for those of you who don't know, Goody Clancy were the architects who designed the J. Michael Ruane Judicial Complex. So where are we at now? We agree on all the use restrictions. We merely disagree on how we ensure them, how we get there. So why are we concerned about the proposed B4 rezoning? Let me cite 3 examples. Many of you were not even alive, let alone living in Salem in 1965, but if you were, and if someone said that Parker Brothers and Sylvania, both worldwide communities with deep Salem roots, would be gone within 5 years, they would look, your average Salemite would look at you like you were crazy. And that's exactly what happened. We have a film at one of the early neighborhood meetings where Len Duncan says, oh, don't confuse this with the Gateway Center at the former Sylvania site because that can never be residential. You'll all get that by email, except you, Councilor Furey, somehow will have to figure out a way of getting a copy of that film to you. And that's the point. All of these examples where people were told, given rock solid, supposedly rock solid assurances that these things that are promised to be permanent are going to be permanent and you can bank on it, never ever materialized. It isn't a case of people worried where there is no factual basis. It's simply paranoia. It has happened, and it has happened time and time again. Now we're told tonight that there's a 30-year limitation, but the zoning is potentially forever. There's no 30-year limitation on the contaminants underlying the universal lot, which are among the most carcinogenic known to science. There's no limitation on that. We have opted for a permanent arrangement, and so long as we get it, we're fully intent as a neighborhood on supporting Webb. Last time, on July 21, we were told by Councilor Correnti that Webb had not done a zoning analysis of the B4, particularly on whether if further zoning relief would still be needed if the B4 proposed rezoning passed. Well, as Justin Whittier pointed out tonight in behalf of Fesna, zoning relief will still be needed even if the proposed B4 zoning change is approved. Right now, 293 Bridge Street is in NRCC. Webb has always conducted retail and wholesale operations at 293 Bridge Street. We gotta believe that if we actually sat down and genuinely collaborated on regarding the desired result, we would, as a group, figure out a way of getting there. Now, Mr. Anderson said that for him, there's a three-partite test for whether his vote on the planning board will be for or against. And that included, how does it conform to the master plan? What is the public benefit? What is the compatibility with surrounding uses? With respect to the master plan, if we had more time, I could make a very detailed argument why, in fact, it doesn't comport B4 zoning with the long-range planning goals of the city of Salem, any more than insisting at the old, for those again of you who are old enough or who were present to remember it, insisting on the former zoning at the old Pickering fuel lot, which all of us now know as Pickering Wharf, were put in place. The future was not those oil storage facilities. The future was Pickering Wharf. And one could make an argument the same is true for 293 and 297 Bridge Street. Public benefit. There's no information on that, Mr. Anderson. We don't have any. If Webb was going to spend $890,000 when they were going to build a 35-foot high facility covering approximately 80% of the universal lot, surely they're not going to pay $890,000 now. Mr. Von Braun already said to you, well, you know, if it's sold before October 2017, the city will have to repay Mass Development $500,000. How is that going to compare with the new amount? How does the parking revenue that would have been generated compare with the real estate taxes for the new Webb lot? These are all essential questions, but I don't know, Mr. Anderson, how you evaluate the public benefit, because you don't have answers to those. Compatibility with surrounding uses. There are only a few B4 zoning districts in Salem. None this large, none even remotely similar to 293 and 297 Bridge. None similar in scope or as near to the adjacent historic district. None even remotely close by. The point is, again, let's go slow. Let's genuinely collaborate and let's get it done right. Get it done right in a way that gives each side, Webb, the city, and the neighborhood, a degree of comfort that we're not being snookered. that we are getting something permanent and that we are getting something as promised. And, you know, we're not NIMBYs. Historic Salem, Inc., the last time I checked, was not a 501c3 that is just designed to look over 293 and 297 Bridge Street. It is a premier public interest preservation group, and you, I trust, have read how emphatically they oppose this proposed B4 zoning. We don't want to appeal. We really don't. But we will. I assure you of that. In 5-6 years down the road, we'll find out who was right. Webb doesn't want that, Mr. Correnti doesn't want that, the neighborhood doesn't want that, and I assume the city doesn't want that. And yet, that's exactly what you are forcing the neighbors to do. Wars should start only when there are no alternatives. And each side believes that it wants to start that war in order to pursue its own goals. There are plenty of alternatives, and we should not be in that collision course. Again, we should be sitting down and working it out collaboratively. You know, people use these terms like collaboratively and transparency and all of that, and so often it's just sloganeering. Let's do it genuinely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none? Councilor Dibble?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I guess you can all kind of blame me for being here. I'm the one who doodled at our first meeting and took the footprint and moved it to the other side of the existing building, and I showed it to a few fellow councilors. And then back in February, March, I went to Webb, rang the doorbell, talked to Bob, had a nice conversation at Webb about, is it possible to move this over to the other side? And at that time, they decided to go forward with the independent building on the Universal Steel. My goal was to save the public walkway and not to cause the Universal parking lot to be dug up, and several other things that were raised at several meetings, including about 2.5 inches of submittals of the ones I printed out. It was a long list. And I thought it was a good compromise, and I applauded Webb when they came back to the table with something that's slightly different than what we had talked about back in February, March, Bob. I forget when that was, through you, Mr. President. I'm concerned with some of the comments that we just heard. I thought that we were getting very close. We were so close. It seemed like we were closer at our last meeting than we are now. And that's too bad, because I want to see Webb stay. I like the idea of what they're proposing, to put the building on the other side of the property. A few concerns I'd like, through you, Mr. President, to have, well, in fairness to our new city planner, I guess our assistant, or to the city solicitor, just to confirm, based upon some of the comments here tonight, if we could ask, if you can indulge me and ask, I guess the city solicitor, Beth Renard, to speak very briefly about the spot zoning issue that was raised, and if this is an issue, which she's already submitted in writing, but I just want to confirm that for the record here tonight. And then what happens with the EPA use restriction on the former Universal Steel parking lot? What happens there if these two lots, from a legal standpoint, if these two lots merge together? I think that it's still in full force. So a park cannot be built, a school cannot be built, we cannot not have residents there. I just want to confirm that through our solicitor. Also, what is the final numbers for paying back the state? I know the $500,000 number has been offered several times in several letters that I got today. And thank you for the letters that I got. I wish I got them yesterday, could have digested them a little bit better. But what is the final numbers that we have to pay back to the state? Because I know there are several deductions from that brings it down to maybe $150,000, or I don't know what the final numbers are. And then a vote here of the city council tonight, the fourth issue, a vote of the city council tonight, can it be somehow put contingent upon approval of the deed restriction wording?
Counselor, the only vote we have tonight is to close the public hearing and refer to the planning board for them to deliberate. There's no other approval before us at this point.
That's correct,
It
but
has come back from the planning
can we
board.
amend that to allow for a contingency that the city council will have to see and approve the deed restriction wording, the use restriction that
I
Mr.
don't believe
Briscoe-
so, but we would be able to, we can not act on the final zoning recommendation until we have seen said deed and deed restriction. But this part of it, no, this is how the public hearing process works.
Again, all the way from the beginning of this public testimony back in the beginning of 2016, and again here tonight, we've heard wonderful comments from some of the neighbors. I'm just trying to have the city, I guess through you, the president, and our city solicitor, to confirm and to clarify some of the issues that I just raised.
Well, if Attorney Renard can address any of those.
With respect to the deed restriction, I've already begun drafting that into the case law and made sure that the deed restriction not only protected the city, but the direct abutters as well. So when you have a restriction on a property, if you have named properties that are in that restriction, those persons can also enforce the restriction. So we've already begun to develop that, and just today we started to work on how do we incorporate the existing parcel within that. So we will have that, it's under development right now, so I don't expect that will take too much longer. As to mass development's repayment, it's the city's position that our lien, our tax lien, which is in excess of $287,000, is off the top of that payment. In addition to that, when we draft the notice of the public auction, we will include the ability for a purchaser and the city to delay the conveyance of that property until everything's worked out, it's permitted, the appeals have passed. And that could be, as you know, very lengthy time. Forgot the other questions, Council.
Okay,
Oh, the contamination of the parcel, that restriction will remain on that parcel. With respect to merger comes into effect when you're talking about zoning. So for example, if you own two pieces of property, one that goes to 5,000 square foot lots, and you wanted to then develop that, and basically state that those two lots are grandfathered lots, if they were undercoming on ownership, for zoning purposes, they merge. So merger happens for zoning purposes, so you have to alleviate non-conformity of your lot if you have two properties that are owned by the same entity.
That answer your questions, Counselor?
pretty much, just to confirm, thank you, Mr. President, on just confirmation on the spot zoning issue, how firm a ground are we on there? And then placing any votes, either now or at our next vote for sale of the property, contingent upon the deed restriction. Can we get that deed restriction well in advance so we can all digest in advance of the, I guess again, if it's almost done, can we have that within the next couple of weeks before we go to vote for sale of the property?
Just very briefly, Counselor, before Attorney Renard your response to that, just in my meeting with the mayor this morning that we have normally in every week of council weeks, we discussed the timeline, the prospective timeline of this. We have the process occurring tonight. We will not have this in for this week. So it would be, in fact, it would be back at the earliest, it would be back for the next week's meeting. So not this one. So we should have, at the very least, time to review any other any restriction language and such that's completed by the city solicitor and then circulated around for us to review. So we will have some time to address that and deal with any questions, and I have no problem with this body not acting until we have had a chance to do that. I think that's obvious. That's, no matter what the recommendation is, I think that's very common sense on our part, because the more we can do to ensure that this process is handled the right way, the better. So.
Right, thank you. I want to thank the solicitor for outlining and addressing my concerns, but mostly thank you to the neighbors for coming here and being with us the entire process, and also to Webb for being flexible and changing the designs.
there are any other questions of the city solicitor or the city planner, I would entertain them at this time. Otherwise, I'd like to see a motion. Councilor Sargent?
First of all, whatever goes to the planning board will come back to us and can be put into committee of the whole, so we can talk about the deed restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to be voted on whatever night it comes back, so that's it. But I'd just like to cover one point as quickly as I can, please. And one of it is, part of my issue is with zoning and how it affects the neighborhoods, et cetera, around the city. But my other issue is the Universal Steel lot itself, and the fact that I feel it's needed for the growth of the biggest industry we have in the city is tourism, and the expansion of the courthouse buildings. So, and I'd asked the planning board and some of the city councilors also, the planning board's going back to a meeting. I would ask you to go down Washington Street, take a right up Essex Street, take a left down Barton Square, and as you get to the end, walk along the fence, maybe go in the back way to your meeting. And then look at that parking lot behind the fence. And I've asked many people downtown, I've said, wouldn't it be nice, I've stood at that fence and asked people, wouldn't it be nice if the city owned that parking lot? And everybody's, replied yes. We can park there, go to city offices, go downtown, walk through it. There's a gate there that's locked now. But most people don't know that the city used to own that parking lot. We sold it about 30 years ago. Used to be a city-owned parking lot. So we lost the convenience of our people being able to park there. We lost the revenue. We lost a lot when we lost that parking lot. It was a nice place to slide into downtown. But for some reason, it was voted surplus, sold, part of a development, very similar to what's going on today. And I just asked the planning board to think, if you could park there and go to your meetings, how convenient that would be, not to mention the other people in Salem. And I ask you to think, if you had it today, that before you, would you vote to rezone that so we could sell it to somebody else? Or would you vote to keep it for the people of Salem for our own parking? I believe that Universal Steel lot is an asset that we should keep as a city and should help us expand our parking needs. So, thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Carenti?
Yes, Mr. President, if I could just address one key issue that I think was raised that I think might needs to be addressed before deliberation, and that is the suggestion that the Universal lot could be zoned NRCC. We looked at that carefully, and we thought that if that could be done and that would be acceptable, that's something that we certainly would have talked about and come forward with. It is our opinion that if that is zoned NRCC, we would not be able to proceed with the project. And the reason is that Section 8.4.5 of the Salem zoning ordinance, storage, warehousing, and wholesale distribution facilities are prohibited in the NRCC use. So you would be rezoning that lot to a prohibited use. That lot does not enjoy grandfathered status of any kind, unlike the Webb lot. That lot is zoned R2 currently and was never used for those purposes. So if the and it's an admirable, we understand where the sentiment is coming from, but sometimes the law gets in the way. And if that's NRCC zoned, it's our opinion we could not go forward with the project. Last point, as to other projects in the NRCC, which was mentioned, and somehow that Webb was getting a shortcut or a free ride or a expedited review. The difference between the other projects in the NRCC and this one is that the Webb use as currently used is prohibited in the NRCC zoning district. The projects that were cited in the NRCC are uses that are either permitted or specially permitted. And so those projects are going forward asking for special permits or permits. That is not available for the Webb project in the NRCC district. So I hope that that's helpful and maybe clarifying.
Councilor Lovely?
Just by way of comment, and Attorney Corinthian and I have talked about this as well with the mayor. My thought was to, although currently the use would not be allowed, that we could have amended NRCC to make that an allowable use. That is an option that we have. That's what I've been talking about since mid-spring. However, the administration has chosen to go in another direction. But he is correct that it's not an allowable use, but certainly it could be changed to be an allowable use in the NRCC or by special permit or an allowable use. But I just wanted to point that out because that's how I felt would give some security to the B4. I thought there was a much cleaner and easier solution. But I do understand that potentially you could have some other effect on other parcels, and Attorney Corinthian and I discussed that. I didn't look at the parcels, neither did he, but that was what I was hoping we could do to give some sort of security policy, essentially, to prevent the misuse of a B4 use in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. President of Council. So why B4? Because B4 is the only district in the Salem zoning ordinance that permits the web use. There is no other district that permits this use. That's why B4.
Councilor Flamico.
Through you, Mr. President, another quick question for Attorney Correnti. Is there another way to put in the deed restriction a requirement to go before DRB versus voluntarily?
I don't think that would be a deed restriction type of requirement, but we hear the sentiment. I'm not sure that, I'd defer to the solicitor on that as to whether that's an appropriate deed restriction type of use.
Contingent on the sale then?
You know, we're mixing land use law and zoning. And those are two separate worlds, although it sounds like they're all the same. And when we go to record things at the Registry of Deeds, they're very particular as to what can be in there and what can't be in there. We hear the sentiment, Councilor, and, you know, I'm sure there'll be discussion around what if and how to do that. But I don't want to say a deed restriction is possible.
Contingency of the sale.
All right, Councilor Ryan?
When did the, you probably would know, well, you might, when did the deed restriction come into play? Like, this is the first I heard about it. I'm all for it. I think it actually gives more, with not being able to, my first question you already answered, of why didn't you do the NRCC? The deed restriction, I think, gives a lot of,
Yeah, I think, through you, Mr. President. So the answer to that is, as we kept looking at the B4 and we kept hearing the concerns about all of why people don't like B4 and why people don't want to support B4. And we said, we have a deed coming to us. So we don't want you, you know, while the request is to zone to B4, we would like you to think of it as a request to zone to B4 with a deed covenant that won't allow any other B4 uses except the web use. And the natural question would be, how can we be sure that'll be enforced? And, you know, do we have to depend on web to do anything? Well, we understand that question, and we think that it is enforceable. And so that just came, Councilor, that was a fairly recent. This is the first time we're talking about this publicly, so you didn't miss anything at prior meetings.
So I'll address just one thing that came up in this when we speak about the DRB and their function in the NRCC, in the B5. The DRB's role in this, there is no official, should we go ahead with this, there is no official role for the DRB at that point, but I will reflect back very briefly to the very first project that I participated in, even before I was sworn in to the City Council, because it began that fall. But that was the project for the CVS on Canal Street at the corner of Canal and Jefferson. That project, at the time, the initial proposal, and Chairman Anderson can speak to this very well because he came to all the meetings as a very engaged citizen who was in a butter and spoke to this, and CVS's initial design was for a cookie cutter CVS store that looked pretty much what they have on Highland Avenue over by the corner of Marlborough Road. A large standalone building with
that looks like it fits anywhere whatsoever. And with a lot of work, the planning board was the only body that had jurisdiction over this, but the planning board worked with them and got them to redesign the project in such a way that it fit the neighborhood much, much better, worked in scale, worked without any non-compliant signage, and had a lighting plan that fit in, and parking circulation plan fit in. So the planning board within the purvey of site plan review does not specifically have design jurisdiction, but they do have a lot of influence and they do have a lot of say in the process. Although it does not go to the extent of what the DRB can require, it still is quite extensive. So that takes me back in time 5 years in the Wayback Machine at this point, but the process worked very well there and it has worked in other projects of that sort. So that's just my editorial comment from the chair. Any other councilors wish to ask questions at this point? If not, Councilor Famico?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just before I make these motions, I'd just like to clarify after this, it goes to the planning board. During the planning board, there is no public comment because this is the joint public hearing part. We went through this before several months ago. And then they have 21 days to give us the referral back. And then from there, the city solicitor could fill me in there. How long do we have to act on that?
Basically, we have 3 months from today approximately.
Just a little overview for everyone again.
Could the city solicitor speak up on our last comment? Sorry. I didn't hear.
90 days, 90 days from
The close of the public hearing. Thank you.
From the close of the public hearing today.
So with that, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Councilor Famico moves the public hearing be closed, seconded by Councilor Gerard. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved.
And then I
Councilor
further
Famico.
move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Councilor Famico moves that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation, seconded, I believe, by Councilor Gerard. All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. And Councilor Fury?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. President.
Councilor Fury moves we adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.